which is why I'm going to start with a warning that this will probably be emotional for me and potentially even for you. I probably will cry, sorry about that. I blame my age. My name is Archie because the 4th, it's an absolute honor to be here for a multitude of reasons, which I'm surely going to get into. But this place, Blacksburg, Virginia, especially here downtown, is my home. It feels like my home. And I'm extremely thankful for Blacksburg, for the College of Architecture and Design, the faculty, Chris Pritchett, for giving Jeff and I opportunity since day one. That's why I'm able to stand here in 2022, which is absolutely surreal. 17 years ago, I moved into a loft right behind that wall at 115 College Avenue, apartment 3, with what would become my lifelong best friend and business partner, Jeff Franklin. This is the loft. This was Playlab day one. That window is Jeff's bedroom. That desk is our collective desk, and I slept above his bedroom in a loft. We paid what was it, Dad? $305 a month, $240 a month. That's my dad and my mom. This is where, in this small apartment, an extremely strange adventure began. And this photo is extremely important to me. I met Jeff in 2003, day one, second year architecture studio. We had Jay Stokel. This is two photos of both of us wearing the same goddamn outfit in 2 different states. And we didn't meet until we were 19. So it was written that this would be our future. We had a lot of fun. Everybody had these task lamps in Kogel. And Jeff we both have a strange sense of humor, and part of that sense of humor is beating yourself up a little bit. And so Jeff was really good at that. And he said this to me, he said, not a day in high school went by without me getting the bird. And I don't know if that was true or not, but this was the sort of foundation of our friendship. It was humor, it was fun, it was ridiculousness. It wasn't about architecture, quote unquote, or design. It was about friendship, trying to make each other laugh and seeing what was possible. Which birthed a really fun activity, which was to leave Kogel and go to Bolo's. And we did this every single day before we eventually moved into an apartment together right next to Bolo's. We would, quote unquote, steal the entire stack of napkins, which that was probably the most rebellious thing Jeff had ever done in his life up to that point. And our task was to draw on every napkin until they were full. And the results of these napkins were ridiculous. And I can open up a whole Dropbox folder of these. We've scanned every single one. But we started dreaming at Bolo's. I mean, the smell of coffee and getting away from architecture and thinking about what was possible started there, over countless cups of coffee. And this is one of those napkins. We drew what we thought was going to be our future. And the future was 2 cups of coffee and a stack of napkins, which was a diagram for what would happen after we left Bolo's and graduated and moved to cities and moved to New York and founding Playlab and doing a lecture and then making a lot of money and then dying naturally on my side and then him dying when he joined NASCAR. Everything was about humor and ridiculousness. And this napkin is extremely important because it was made almost 20 years ago at Bolo's. We just started leaning in to everything that we wanted, even if we didn't have the resources or the ability to do it. And so we thought of everything as Playlab, as our studio. This is the first one right here. Then we moved to Progress Street. That was our second one. And then we took the leap and moved to New York. We had a lot of studios that began on Melrose, and we had this small closet-sized space. Then one opened up across the hall, and we were ambitious, and it was another $40 a month or whatever. So we rented that, and it seemed bigger, and our dreams felt bigger. And then I found a studio for a little bit more money, and we moved into this loft. And then we moved into a client's office, which was a steel fabrication shop, so steel dust was on our computers every morning when we came. And and we were there for 18 months. Then we moved to Bergen Street, then we moved to Perry Street, then we moved to the New Museum on the Bowery, then we moved to Elizabeth Street, and then we moved to Canal Street, where we were for a number of years before we got the itch and moved to Los Angeles, California. Now we are at 909 South Santa Fe in the Arts District in Los Angeles, and things look a little bit different. This acronym has been a statement we have said to ourselves since 2004. We are obsessed with space, the Apollo program, anything that takes education, design, dreaming of another place, and then activating it. And space was the sort of placeholder for us. And this phrase we came up with is, we'll see what we see when we get there. That the idea of the space program, especially something like the Voyager space program, wasn't about necessarily discovering anything in particular. There was no particular goal. It was about exploration and seeing what you would see when you get there. And it's there that you can make a decision about what's next, which is what I'm going to talk about today. I would have never imagined being back here in Blacksburg on this stage, let alone having 10 people at Playlab in Los Angeles. This is an image of our studio minus Blossom, sorry Blossom, who started on Monday, generated by DALL-E AI, just with a few select photos of us and I think a couple weird search terms like design director, and then Jeff gained a little bit of weight there in that photo. Dylan has a lot of muscles too, but anyway, so this is what it looks like now. Calling this lecture the foundation of a never-ending skyscraper, for a bunch of reasons. But this place is the foundation, but you'll see through the course of this that the foundation has nothing to do with design, and that there's no goal to the look, size, aesthetic, reality of the skyscraper that we're building, which is called Playlab Incorporated. The lecture is going to be in two parts. One, where I emotionally climb the levels of this skyscraper, which is essentially the studio over the past 17 years, in order to provide an example, a visual example of what happened beginning back on College Avenue. And the other part is where maybe we just talk, which is probably going to be the better part, and where some better gems may come out of. Kogel Hall was this place of absolute wonderment. I didn't even really know what architecture was growing up. My parents thankfully bought me a book on Frank Lloyd Wright, and I was obsessed. And that was maybe the only point of reference that I had before applying early decision to Virginia Tech. And then I got here, and there was a library, and I didn't even really like libraries. And in it were countless examples of things that I just literally never knew was possible. And Jeff and I bonded over that. And the Eames office was the central core thing that made our brains completely explode. And for a variety of reasons, it wasn't necessarily about the design of products, but it was about the story of how they got there. And this one quote stuck out to us, which was the foundation of Playlab, which was that they said, "I don't believe in this gifted few concept, just in people doing things they are really interested in doing. They have a way of getting good at whatever it is." Meaning, the underdog, the belief in the impossible. You don't need to have all the things that people say that you need. You actually just need to move forward in interest and curiosity and hard work. And then there, you discover something else entirely. Then we came across this book, which is a design duo that was founded over email in New York. And they created a book called Tell Me Why, the first 24 months of a New York design company. And it was the first time that we saw the story of creating a studio. Nobody had talked about that before. And we read this book cover to cover, and then we flew to New York to meet them at 19 years old, and we asked them how we could start our own office. We were scared, and Jan Wilker said this one thing to Jeff and I on his couch, which is, what's the worst that can happen? If it doesn't work, you go back to live with your parents? Which talks about my privilege, among a lot of things, but it was true. There's nothing that can stop us from doing something that we believe in and something that we want to do. So now I'm going to talk about the building, which is essentially 17 years and 17 minutes, which is hard to do because Playlab, the way that we've described it, is as a creative studio with no particular focus, exploring themes using art, architecture, and design to initiate ideas for ourselves and for others, which is a nice way of saying that we have no idea what we're doing, and it doesn't look necessarily like we're doing anything in particular. The first thing we ever did was we wanted to create animations. We wanted to create characters. That was something that Jeff and I were very, very serious about. We went to, on the corner where Moe's Burritos was, it used to be Crossroads, and we would just go and get DVDs and were exposed to so much. We wanted to make film. That's how Playlab was sort of concepted in the very beginning. And so we drew this character called Hugs on one of our napkins. Then Jeff designed a pamphlet for the award ceremony in 2006 for the graduating class of Virginia Tech College of Architecture and Urban Studies. He had no idea what he was doing. He was not designing graphics at any point, and he went on this journey to figure it out. And we took that on together. When we moved to New York, we had this very small studio that was behind a chicken coop. It was extremely cold. There was no heat in it. We had this one desk, which I'm so sorry to say we stole from Kogel and brought with us to New York as a token. That blue chair is also stolen from Kogel. And with this one, 50 square foot room, we just envisioned the future. We had no clients. We were designing posters. We would print letters out and just see how many words we could spell before the ink ran out on the printer. And we were just trying things. We eventually got a job doing a poster for $75. This is for a composer named Max Richter. We took anything we possibly could do to see if we could do it. This was a couch in the main space of the studio. It was disgusting. And we used toilet paper to spell out Max's name. Then we decided, well, nobody was actually coming to us to do anything because we were 22 years old and we had no experience. So we decided to initiate projects, and this became a foundation of the studio, which is, let's just do the things ourselves without waiting for somebody to ask us to do them. So we created a record label. And the first record we put out was with a band from Blacksburg called The House Floor at the time. And then the second was a band from Virginia Beach called Mossy Moss. We designed this in 24 hours in that small studio space where we had a studio mate. We painted his butt cheeks the colors of Pepsi because the record was called Proud Sponsors of Pepsi, and made the butt crack the Y. Then we moved into this loft in South Williamsburg, and nothing was bigger. We didn't have any more money. It just felt like we had a real studio for the first time. And so we designed it to feel like that on the right. And the first project is we went down to Greensboro, Alabama, because when we were in college here, this student Keith came back from Rural Studios, Samuel Maccabee's program at Auburn University, and he spoke about not architecture and form and materiality, but he talked about people, the story of people, what you make for them, why you make for them, how you ask them tough questions, and then that's where design comes from. So we packed our bags and moved to Alabama with the intention of seeing what we saw when we got there. We ended up opening a pie shop because we thought this town was incredibly broken, and that we had this naive thought that conversation would be helpful, especially pie. So we used all materials that we could find for free, and we opened the door to this pie shop that was given to us from this nonprofit called Hero Housing. While we were there, we had to pay for our time there because that wasn't making us any money. And we designed LACMA's first iPhone app, and that was just sort of a strange, thankful thing a friend gave us the opportunity to do. We didn't even own iPhones. I don't even really know if I'd ever seen one. And we just kept going. Designed a magazine for our friends called Line. Started doing more branding. This is for that steel fabrication shop we worked out of. And then we started getting involved in the sort of aspirational things we wanted to do. Graphics were under our control. We could make them on our computers and make something look like we did it, or looked bigger than it was. Architecture was going to be something so much harder to get into, so we started as quick as we could entering competitions, the path. This was for the New Museum of Contemporary Art, and they had a call to design a new typology of street tent. And we proposed this project called Worms, and we won, and we were able to build it. For the first time, we had a big budget, and we could throw it into this thing, and we had to figure out how to make it. And so you start to kind of like go through the motions of what it's like to realize projects at scale. Our ambitions got bigger. We designed a whole block in Croatia called Battle Block. We did not win. And then it led us to this point with our friends Don King Wong and Juana Stănescu, who started an architecture office called Family New York at the same time. And we thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could swim in the river in New York, which was a naive concept, no dissimilar to the record label or the pie shop. And we were making $32,000 max a year. I think a lot of months we just couldn't even afford to pay ourselves anything, and it didn't matter because we were so obsessed with this journey. And we proposed this project called Plus Pool. The idea was that we would build a water filtering floating pool in the East River, Olympic size, making it possible to swim in it for the first time in 100 years. We had no intention of becoming a real project until it became one. And we created a nonprofit, which I became the executive director of. We invented this technology, we patented the technology, raised millions of dollars, and now it will be funded and backed by the city of New York and built at Pier 35 in the East River, which was founded in 2010. An insanely long journey, but something that cemented this sort of faith, or this idea that we could do something together without any resources. These sort of smaller, weird projects started to catch storm, and we were invited to go teach the way that we thought about things in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, of all places. So we created this course called Playlab Arabia, and this incredible photo of Jeff with his old glasses behind these hookahs. Then we were invited to submit for a grant, government of Stockholm, Sweden. We designed this exhibition and lived in Sweden for a couple of weeks. And then we kept initiating projects. We had this realization that there was no architecture magazine we actually liked. And that there weren't publications that were actually going deep into topics and providing a variety of viewpoints and from perspectives of people that never had written before. And so we created this magazine called Clog, in which we produced 20 issues over the past decade. Then strange things started happening. Bruno Mars reached out and asked us to design a vehicle for his tour at the time, which was called the Moonshine Jungle Tour. We went, they gave us a solid budget. We didn't know what the word turnkey meant, and we had to look it up. They said, your project is turnkey, here's this amount of money. And we had to figure out how to build this thing. And we went to a police auction, that was Jeff's idea, and we bought this food truck for $5,000 and then had to find a shop to renovate it. The shop was completely clueless and ghosted us, so we took over the shop, and my wife wired the electric with my dad's advice on the inside of this truck, and then I went on tour. For some reason, I was at a party, maybe relatively intoxicated, and a guy came up to me and said, I saw you did Plus Pool and Worms, can you design my house upstate? And I was like, absolutely, we can do that. And I went out on the street and I called Jeff and I was like, we have our first house. He was like, we do not know how to design a house. I was like, well, let's figure it out. So the house got built, but I show the drawing always because it's a lot more fun than the way that the client ended up taking the direction of the house. But it was a fun exercise. Constantly, we were trying to do things that we haven't done. I didn't want to design a bunch of houses. I just wanted to see if we could. And at some point, we were like, we want to do music videos. We want to see what cameras are like. So I convinced Jeff, even though we had no money, to buy this $5,000 camera. No idea how to operate it. And we shot a music video for our friend Alex that we met here in Blacksburg, Virginia, which gave us this opportunity to do more music videos. And we did this one for a punk band, had a little bit more money. That punk band disbanded during the making of this video, so I don't know how successful it was. But the goal was to continue to up the level of the visuals and execution for ourselves. Jeff is amazing because he would always say, and still does, that a good idea is easy to come up with. It's executing it which is hard. And so we needed to devote ourselves to the practice of figuring out how to realize ideas extremely well, which takes a whole lot of things we didn't learn at school, and we had to learn the hard way. So any opportunity that we could get to raise the bar for ourselves and not for others, not for the outside view of what the studio looked like, then we would check that box and we would say we would do that. There was a small female-led sex toy company that came to us, that's something that we would have never, ever imagined working on. And these two women came with this like beautiful vision and trusted us to create a brand from the ground up that would communicate equity and equality and sexual health and all of these things that were topics that we weren't well versed in, which showed that Playlab could be a vessel for the investigation of ideas and getting them to people in ways that were beautiful and efficient. And so we branded this, set the art direction, shot all the images, and now that company is booming. We started to do more film. This is a strange video that I don't really know how to explain. And then we started doing more physical work, installations. This was one of our first exhibitions for BMW Mini Cooper in Greenpoint, this project space called ADO. And we just used the opportunity in the budget to hire all of our friends. So we made a collaborative series of installations. We hired 18 of our friends as collaborators. People started to take us seriously a little bit more. The painter Christopher Wool asked us to come to his studio and asked if we could help figure out how to create an archive for him that would then become part of this practice, which we did. And then we started getting invited as artists to do projects and perform in new ways. So this is, in 2018, we were invited to go to the National Museum of Art in Bucharest, Romania, and we did a collaborative exhibition called Office Hours that it would just take too long to explain. And then we started doing fashion campaigns, which were like, we were sitting around the studio one day, and we're like, fashion is where music, art, architecture, all of the things we love come together within fashion. Let's just take our shot. And so we started emailing people, being like, can you give us a chance? Can you give us a chance? And I had this friend in Richmond, Virginia, who had a shop called Need Supply. And he was like, I'll let you do things. So we started doing things, and he was like, you're actually pretty good at it. So we just kept doing it, and using that to leverage to get to new things. This is the first sort of fashion retail installation we ever did for a company called Theory. And then we just kept moving, and we approached this brand called First Dibs, this auction house, and they had a gallery, and we're trying to stoke the fire and see if we can convince people to do things that they didn't think were possible. So Playlab decks, our ideas, our documents, they always start with the what if. We say, wouldn't it be cool if? And so we approached them and said, wouldn't it be cool if you gave us every single lamp in your archive and somebody could stand in one spot and turn everything on at the same time, which we did, and they let us do it, so we did this installation. And we just kept doing it. This is a wind machine we made for a vaporizer company in LA. But public art was one of those checklist things we just wanted to be a part of. We had this just passion for public work and didn't know what that would look like. This is the first thing that we did, which was a public exhibition. They shut down Melrose Street in Brooklyn, New York, and we had this concept, which is everybody got their furniture off of Craigslist, especially the free section. We're extremely poor and young. And we were like, what does Craig's house look like? So we scoured the free Craigslist section, got as much as I could fit in my wife's Volkswagen Passat, and then created a living room in the center of Bed-Stuy here in Brooklyn. The ideas got a little bit weirder. We had an opportunity to do another exhibition, and we wanted to do a piece. We had a lot of puns flying around the studio. We wanted to do a piece that was based on the observation that the actor Joaquin Phoenix's first name also sounds like the word walking. And so we just collected screenshots of every instance in which Joaquin Phoenix walked in his films, and then debuted that as an art piece. Then people started taking us seriously for that. So there's a pattern sort of emerging. And a gallery, a really well-known gallery in Chelsea, invited us to do a performance in this collective show that was right after Trump was elected. And it was around the idea of truth in the New York Times and news. And Ellsworth Kelly was in the show, and on Kawara and Richard Prince, and we were like, this is amazing that we're in this lineup. And so we created this piece called Stationary Paperboy, where we staffed a recumbent bicycle, and for the duration of the show, if you walked into the gallery, somebody would be there to throw that day's newspaper in your face. We had to sign an insurance policy, and the security guard thought it was like the funniest thing in the world. We would do this thing where we would go out for dinner or meet somebody at an event, and we would say, hey, we're gonna make blank. Because they would ask us what we want to do. Instead of showing them what we've done, we would say, we're going to make this. And And so we were like, we were going to do large-scale public works. And this woman, Sarah Berman, was like, I can find an opportunity for you to do that. And so she found this organization that commissioned us open-endedly to propose something for the middle of Midtown Manhattan, which we proposed a project called Grown Up Flowers, which is 30 to 40-foot inflatable flowers that were plopped down throughout a few square blocks. Each of them had their own characters, and they had collectible postcards, and we had t-shirts to match. And the idea was simply to sort of like encourage fun, but there was an internal joke, which was, okay, every artist throughout history at some point, for the majority of the time, have used flowers as a medium. So that's our entry point. So we're just going to do the largest flowers possible as one of our first gestures as public artists. And it worked because the same organization commissioned us that next year to come back. And we did a project called Fantasy Landscapes, where we commissioned this all-female studio in New Jersey that just does Hollywood backdrops. And so we created a series of 5 installations in which you could get within them and transport yourself to different places throughout the world. The ideas just started to take on different scales, and we realized it doesn't matter how big the budget is or how big the scale of the project is, that everything is based on an idea or a concept, and that's the core. This is for a toilet paper company called Plant Paper, and they did an art exhibition in LA around the idea of creating toilet paper holders during quarantine. Ours was simply called Rock, Paper, Scissors. Another studio, another gallery called Fisk in Portland invited us to do a piece. We did a piece called Art History Bouquet, where we sold out one flower from 20 major artists' works and created a bouquet of them. Then it became ambitious for us to create furniture, both as art pieces, but as functional objects. This is our first chair we debuted at our own space, a gallery we opened called 909, in the front of our studio. And this piece is called Teamwork, which cannot be used alone. Then we started looking at other objects. What else can we get into? Shoes were a thing that were interesting to us. They were sort of physical, functional sculptures. And we were working with a lot of shoe brands and designers. So we just started designing shoes internally within the studio as a part of our practice for team building. And then that became something that started getting us more projects. And then a company asked us to start a shoe brand, which we launched in 2019. Then brands started coming to us and asking us if we could celebrate their things in different ways. This is a massive campaign we did for Nike and Stranger Things Season 3, where we were able to build these sort of crazy installations for the first time, almost like film or theater setups. We had no idea how to do it. And then by doing it, going through the act of it, I think we were emboldened with the idea that we could go larger. Started taking on larger campaigns. This is with Kate Moss and a brand called Zadig & Voltaire out of Paris. And the puns just kept coming. They're a Paris-based brand, and they wanted to do a campaign in Paris. And we're like, well, let's just pretend that Kate Moss showed up in the wrong Paris. So we flew to Paris, Texas, and shot this campaign, took over the town, and the mayor of the town was like ecstatic. Also seeing Jeff in that town was hilarious. And then other brands all over the world. This is Istanbul, Turkey, a brand called They Benjamin asked us to do a campaign where we wanted to look like they were moving fast, and we were able to build that same technique of Hollywood backdrops. Those are actual cutouts of cars, not physical cars and not photoshopped. It's an actual image. We started testing the limits of our ability to kind of paint pictures. Then we started working with Pharrell Williams and doing a bunch of campaigns with him and Adidas, which just kept growing and enabled us to work with new types of photographers and tell new types of stories and new sort of mediums, so that this image and this image couldn't be further apart. It was about the concept of what we did. And this series of images, the project netted 5 images, was the asset list. And what we did was say, okay, if we're going to start showing up in places and doing photo shoots for clothing, we're going to do something that makes the place better. So we went to this organization in the middle of the desert called the Noah Purifoy Foundation. It's an incredible black artist in Los Angeles. And he collected sort of outsider sort of art. He would collect sort of fragments and trash, and he would create things from it. And so we created a whole program, a whole system that was a give-back system to that foundation through this photo shoot. But the ambitions kept growing, realizing what it looks like to design clothing and product, and sell that product, and do a photo shoot or do a film, or what if we have our own? So just 2 weeks ago, we launched our own brand with some partners called His Was. And then brands started coming to us. We met this young fashion designer at 21 years old, and he was nominated for this award, which is a big award called the CFDA Award. And he was like, I'm not on the Paris Fashion Week calendar. We didn't even know what Paris Fashion Week was really at the time. We're not on the Paris Fashion Week calendar, but what if we showed up and just did a show anyways? There's no money in the brand. There was a lot of momentum behind Reese. But we're like, well, let's just take over the museum, the Palais de Tokyo, and let's make it look like we're in a forest. And so we employed that technique of sort of Hollywood sets, sort of film sets, and made the runway this sort of fake, mossy trail, which allowed us to take the next step, because this brand, then all of a sudden Paris was obsessed with it and gave us a slot on the calendar, but it was COVID, so we couldn't even go to Paris, so we started shooting films. So we started renting Hollywood sets in the woods and shooting these films. This is walking down a creek where we actually had to dig out the creek, lay plywood, foundation, re-put material on top of it so that they were skimming the surface. And those shows grow, and we had this idea, well, what if we partnered with somebody like the National Forest Service so that we could have a partnership, a true partnership with the work that we're doing as an outdoors brand. And so we got this partnership, and they said, any place, any national forest in the country, you can have access to do your shows. So we asked for the Mount Wilson Observatory, which is, at the time, was the largest telescope in the world. And the glass was the largest piece of glass ever made, and it came from France and all this stuff, and it was where the universe was founded, like where they saw it for the first time and understood it as a concept. So we did the finale of the show walking around the telescope as it was spinning. Then we were like, well, can we just shut down the bridge now? Do we have that power? And the National Forest Service made that happen. So we shut this bridge down and did a walk down that street until we actually made it to Paris in June. This is Reese and his mom. I mean, it was like it's hard to describe, but it was a triumphant thing. It wasn't about, we designed some mounds and sprinkler systems. It was the act of showing up there and all the pieces that led up to showing up there that was the joy of the project, or an ongoing project, which resulted in this crazy takeover of the city street. Obviously, taking over something, a block or whatever, is a constant theme. That's Jeff giving the bird, connecting back to the first thing on my task lamp in Koval. Doing more runway shows. This is a brand called Ruben Selby in London. He wanted to do a show that was somehow incorporated sustainability, but he wanted to talk about the first building he ever saw architecturally that he could remember. So we had him draw it from memory, and we created this scale model of that drawing as the central backdrop for this runway show. Then brands started asking us to design in 3D spaces. This is a completely VR experience. We designed these architectural installations that allowed you to navigate this new Nike ACG collection through this world. And we're doing more physical work. They're connecting art and exhibitions together is sort of a goal of the studio. And we partnered with this agency called UTA in LA in their artist space. And we started with this one show for Ernie Barnes. Now we're doing 3 exhibitions a year for this gallery. Then somehow, some way, we got connected with the artist Drake in 2018 and started doing a variety of work with him and have continuously every week since that year. This is the first thing we were able to really execute, which was a series of architectural installations for the summer Scorpion tour that followed him as he toured around. Then we created DrakeRelated.com, which is sort of his homepage, his website, which is a virtual world completely rendered out exact of his home. This is his recording studio, and in it we would bury these sort of secrets or these ideas or releases or stories that would take on a life of its own. Then we launched Nocta.com as a Nike collaboration, and we launched a candle company for him called Better World Fragrance House. We're able to employ all of the things that we've been learning along the way. Until more artists started coming to us. And the first crazy large opportunity was becoming creative director for an artist called Post Malone, where he invited us into the studio during the making of the album and just involved us from a very early phase, where we were listened to and heard and believed and trusted, all the things that we championed since day one at Playlab. And we were able to feel that out-of-body experience of doing something at a scale larger than ourselves again and again, which is the sort of drug that we're chasing at Playlab. But it didn't stop with the record cover. It was everything. He wanted us to touch everything. This is a listening experience we concepted. We did a whole, nobody knows this yet, collaboration with Harley Davidson. So everything from the album to the merchandise to the music videos. We're like, we want to do those too. We've done a few in the past. They didn't really go that well, but we want to try them. And so he allowed us to do as many as we wanted. We built a whole set on the right. Yeah, it's fun. And then continually trying to get into strange territory, and then we met this Hollywood producer that was doing a show for HBO called The Hype, and asked if we would sit globally as the creative director that would advise on the whole show, from the set to the graphic package, and you name it. Again, it doesn't look like Playlab, it looks like we got in the room, which is part of the goal, is to see if we can get in the room and see if we can try to do something that we haven't done before. And then we think about products, furniture, things that we can touch and hold. You know, Jeff left Virginia Tech thinking about product and industrial design in completely new ways. We approached this company in San Francisco called Soup that builds homes for lower income families, really well designed homes. And we talked about developing a product that would really go back and funding more homes for more people. And so Jeff and I came up with this concept called leftovers, that we would just take the scraps from the construction site and turn it into products that would have this closed loop system. So we designed a series of lamps from simply the hardwood floors that were the sort of discarded bits, which will come out later next year. And then furniture started to take a life of its own. We started getting invited to do more and more chairs and objects. This is a chair we did for an exhibition in New York a few months ago called Sexy. We call the chair Vanity, which, yeah, if you sit in it backwards, you can look at yourself. And then people started taking us even more seriously. We were invited to participate in Salone di Mobile in Milan and do an exhibition with this artist, Daniel Archie, where not only we had a chair in the piece, but we subverted that and said, well, what if our chair was the platform for everybody's chair? And so that's what that was. And then one of the biggest kind of culminations of the studio and its practice and the belief in people was meeting this incredible man named Virgil Abloh. We met him in 2013. He had just started this brand called Off-White, and he involved us in a project that early. And as he became super well-known, and he never stopped talking to us. And one day we got an email from the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago saying he was going to have a retrospective before he even turned 40 of all his work. And they were going to do a book. And Virgil had told the museum he wanted to work with his friends, Playlab. And we got this call. Jeff and I were doing a project in Beirut, Lebanon at the time. And we were ecstatic. And so before we knew it, we were back in America, and then we were flown to Paris to meet with Virgil at the Louis Vuitton office, where he had just taken the appointment as the men's artistic director. And he trusted us. He gave us a hard drive of every single file, from every single device, from every single moment of his adult life. And he said, you tell me what goes in the book. And we did. And we designed this book that we entitled Artwork. And it was a fantastic experience. And part of his thinking was, I want to be able to encapsulate all of my work and show it to everybody as clearly as possible so that they can know they can do it too. And then, as it was with Virgil, everything was a nonstop conversation. The way it is with Jeff, drawing on napkins became replaced by WhatsApp messages and reference imagery and drawing on the screen. And he had created a brand called Pyrex Vision before Off-White. And there was this one video, this iconic video with this artist Jim Joe and this rap collective ASAP Mob that became massive. And we were like, shouldn't that be a flip book? And put it in like toy packaging? And he's like, yeah, let's do it. And that's how things happened, almost effortlessly. So we found ourselves at this office with him all the time, talking about the future of doing new types of things. Until one day we're peeling out of the office and we're in an Uber back to Charles de Gaulle and we're headed back to New York where we were at the time. And Virgil asked us, he sent us this text message and he said, I want you a part of my entire ecosystem. Pick anything and I want you to do it. And I started crying in the car. I was like completely obsessed with this man. The fact that he could do what he could do in the way that he did it. And Jeff and I were just looked up to him, and we were like, yeah. And I was like, where do you want us to start? And he said, why don't you do the Louis Vuitton fashion shows? And we had never done a fashion show. There's no reason to believe that we could. Those Reese Cooper shows we had done later. This was our first. And we just tried. We took our shot. And first, we had these conversations about, fuck fashion. This is about the people. How can runway shows be a vehicle for civic gestures? So we asked Louis to give us only outdoor locations, and we picked this site called the Place Dauphine in the middle of the Seine. And we wanted to not really change much about the architectural nature of the site, but we wanted to poke at it. And Virgil had this theme of boyhood, being able to challenge, what was possible for young men and what they believed they could do. And so we symbolized that through a bounce house. We symbolized that through, we got the rights to the oldest public bench in Paris. And we took those drawings with the fabrication shop and blew it up exactly 1.5 times the size of the actual bench. So when VIPs came to the show, their legs would dangle off the benches and look a little ridiculous and feel it too. And that was the first, and we thought maybe that was going to be the last show. And I remember the night before the show, we're doing rehearsal, and we didn't even know that there would be a rehearsal. This is all new to us. I just remember staying there with Jeff and Virgil looks at me, whispers in our ear, and he says, "This is the beginning." And it was. We went on a journey of doing a dozen or more shows. This is this incredible show we did called Heaven on Earth, where he said, just go to the house that Louis grew up in, the first atelier for Louis Vuitton, and tell me what you see. And we met all these craftspeople that worked so hard to create these artful objects. And we were like, we should just champion them. He was like, great, let's do it. And so Klaus Oldenburg style, we just blew up. We 3D scanned every single one of the tools, and we blew them up to a large scale to sort of situate the models and clothing within them. And then we started doing films and taking new trajectories. And we had this idea of, runway shows weren't going to be in Paris anymore. They were going to come to you. That the Playlab Louis Vuitton set design team was always going to be something that came to you. And so we asked Louis if we could design trunks that opened up, and then we would show the model of different cities where we would take over cities, and there would be a container that would drop something, and then a balloon would pop up, and they let us do it. And the first parade we did was in Shanghai, where we took over this dock, and we had inflatables, and made these custom containers, and had Lauryn Hill perform on this crazy LED screen. And then we brought it to Tokyo, and we started upping the level of this. We started hiring filmmakers to actually direct the live stream of the runway shows, and they started taking on a life of their own, and they started becoming films, not just sets. And then thankfully, in this weird way, we wanted to go into this sort of film direction, and fashion's about making sure people were there. But then quarantine hit, COVID hit, and you couldn't have people there, you couldn't have guests. So then we're like, boom, we're doing films like fully. So we would go to these sound stages in Paris and build these sets. This is a set that we designed with Virgil that was based on his favorite building by Mies van der Rohe. So we took this sort of marble motif, and the idea was that throughout the length of the show or the film, the entire building, quote unquote, would disintegrate, which it did. And then around the building, quote unquote, was an ice skating rink, which symbolized boyhood in so many ways. Simultaneously, we're designing a tower in Korea, and we had this idea of could we do a runway show down a series of scaffolding, all modeled by this amazing band in Korea called BTS. And what's funny is this image, we designed that show in 1 week. It wasn't like we needed a lot of time. With Virgil, everything was quick. So this is Jeff in the Louis office with Virgil and our senior design director, Anna. And we're just live designing. And by the end of that week, it was done and built. And the film started becoming bigger. This is a film called Amen Break that was directed by Mahfouz Sultan, where we created different sort of scenes where the models would navigate in and out of. Culminating in this beautiful show of that same collection in Miami, which was Virgil's last. But then while we're in Miami, we got word that he had finished the last collection. And they asked us to design that show. And we had started talking about that show with Virgil, and we were talking about visualizing the sort of the house that dreams are made in. The first show that he did was this giant gradient walkway in the center of Paris. And it was this symbolism of the Wizard of Oz, this journey. We wanted to close the loop on that. And so we thought about the most powerful visual from Wizard of Oz was the tornado, which was Virgil's favorite emoji, but it was also the way that he moved through all of our lives. He was a tornado, and it was beautiful. And so we decided to use the analogy of the tornado to rip the house apart, which is what it felt like when he passed. And we designed a series of structures that moved. So you had performance artists that would fall off the building and then gracefully jump back up due to a trampoline. Or be in a bedroom that's spinning around, the lamp breaks and then snaps back into place. Meanwhile, there's a dinner table with one of the world's best orchestras led by one of the world's greatest composers, doing a score that was custom built by Tyler the Creator, that would end with Tyler the Creator riding a Louis bicycle around this building, a symbol of joy and wit. And then we were invited by the family in Mahfouz to do the last collection that he had for Off-White, which was beautiful because it was 2 shows. He had tried to get into couture work himself. He was constantly expanding and growing and challenging himself in ways that we could only dream of. He designed this beautiful installation that was built around the speaker system we designed that was powered by 2 Roland 909 drum machines. One was Virgil's and one was by an iconic house producer named Jeff Mills, and performed live while the couture trusses walked around a giant hanging chandelier that was custom made in Paris. We took over the store for that show, and then just recently did the brand's first show without him, with the new director, Camara. And then we were asked by Louis if we could continue a couple more shows with the same team of people that were making the product and clothes at Louis, and we took on that challenge, and we tried to continue that theme at a large scale. Virgil always wanted to show at the Louvre. That was his dream, and sadly he was never able to realize that or see it, but we looked at this as sort of something that we could do and try to make him proud. And so we designed this racetrack in the middle of the Louvre, like a Hot Wheels track. We had one image of a Hot Wheels track, and we were like, this is boyhood. And I have a boy, and he has countless Hot Wheels. And it evokes a feeling. So this was the runway. And then we do these shows, these brands, they do spin-off shows, repeat shows, and we brought the same show to the beaches of China. And the simple thought was that we would symbolize all this through sandcastles and through a lighthouse. And so we built this makeshift city on the beach. The scale is unreal. Something that, when I look at this image, we weren't able to make this with the collaborator that we set out on that journey with, but we were able to kind of make it because he put us in the position to be on that journey. And that's how we look at it. I did not cry, I'm very proud of myself. In the book we designed with Virgil, he left behind all these amazing little tidbits. And in it, he said this: I have realized one thing at the end, it's all worth nothing compared to the freedom to express the next idea. And it was like he was speaking to us because, again, that's how we look at Playlab as a practice. There's no goals. We just want the freedom to express an idea with others and for ourselves. Which is why, and hence, the never-ending skyscraper. The future of Playlab is ever evolving, by the hour, and it's changing all the time. Somebody called me out, I think it was you, for having an outdated website, which is an absolute fact, so don't go to it, just go to Instagram. We're launching this site in January, which will be the new Playlab.org, and we had this sort of epiphany that we're not like other studios, we're not like other agencies, so we shouldn't ever attempt to even look like one. So we're dismantling the site, and nobody knows this yet, but We're launching a site that will not have work on it. It will not have past projects. You can go to Instagram or whatever for that. We're going to have one button called Archive, and it will go to our Dropbox, and you can scan it yourself. The point of this website is that we're going to tell you what we're going to make, and they're just going to be constant, updated proposals of what the future of the studio could look like if we had the opportunity to make these things. We're making a sofa, we're doing films, and we are now making shoes. This is what the foundation of Playlab looks like. This is one of the first screenshots of a conversation we had before we even had a studio together. We're in Blacksburg when this was screenshotted. We have been in contact through constant daily dialogue since 2003 about life, dreams, solving problems, you name it. We have no idea where we're going, but the point is that we're going on it together. I'm sharing the emotional bit of this because it's the bit that we weren't really taught. It's the thing that came natural to us. When we left that Dreamhouse show in Paris, I screenshotted this text from Jeff, which, is very transparent, but I think it's helpful because it shows the power of our relationship 20 years in. He's just telling me to have a good flight, and then he says, he's not an emotional creature, doesn't talk as much as I do, or he would be on this stage instead of me. But he said, so blessed to do this with you. It is a dream come true in every sense of the phrase. I'm thankful for who you are, and for you to push me and many others to be the best versions of ourselves. So many more mountains to climb and friends to make along the way. I love you so much. I screenshot this and share it because there is no project, no design, no nothing that comes out of that studio that is more important than this. This is the goal. This is what we're doing, and this is what we're building, and this is what we care about. And I think we have a very fervent belief that that is what makes great work. I asked Dylan, who's also the senior design director in our studio, now he started as an intern, he's now in his 5th year at Playlab. And I asked him to design a poster for this lecture for Chris to screen print. And he slacked me, texted me late at night last week, and he said, I got it. I need a high-res image of the original Playlab napkin. And I just started crying because I knew what he was going to do. And he designed this poster, which is just the Playlab napkin we made here in Blacksburg, with the names of the people that are in it. I shared it with Jeff, and that's his cry emojis when I shared it with him. I think I kind of knew in those days at Bolos that we were onto something, that it was something unique. I'm going to kind of end with this. We had to give a lecture a few years ago at Pratt, and they gave us the opportunity to make a newsprint, get it out to students. And so we created this sort of makeshift manifesto that rings true today, and I'll read it to you now. The ingredients are straightforward: interest, excitement for the unknown, friendship and kindness, hard work, not in a privileged position, sculpting our own reality. Ain't no way they can categorize me. The very opposite of not open. It is not a job. Fuck the money. Never leave your people behind. Include the people around us. Power is an inside job. Looking far, seeing every opinion, cherishing small wins, driven by what could be, a catalyst for the inevitable fusing specializations, trying to get in that room, just not doing it like you. Always take the initiative, connect with them all, blindly go into the void. We share a community of vision, free to fail, starting new conversations without permission, the overwhelming potential. Woo! If there's any takeaway from this emotional, weird thing you probably didn't know you were getting yourself into at 10:30 this morning, despite the amount of projects that I breezed through, this whole thing is not about projects, if that was not clear. It's about people and the potential of what that possible adventure could look like together. Our journey started here in Blacksburg, Virginia, and countless have and countless will. But my learnings are this: Be kind, work hard, be interested, surround yourself with good people, trust yourself, trust each other, as there is no project, again, and no design or no anything that is more important than people, especially the ones next to you, and especially if you don't know them yet. Link and build, as Takeoff said, built for infinity links. I'm a very thankful person, I try to be, but I am, especially in this moment, I'm thankful I can be here today. I'm thankful to Chris Pritchett for inviting me to be here. I'm thankful for the safe place that this college and faculty afforded us, but most of all, I'm thankful today for my parents. Not just because they're sitting right there and drove 5 hours to be here, but because there is no chance on this earth that I'd be here anywhere without them. When I talk about people, trust, communication, belief in each other, these things, I'm talking about them. They taught me what no one could. They always questioned, especially when the charges from Mishmish came in, but they never opposed. They just believed and supported. And it was in that room, behind that wall of the lyric, that I thought I should leave Virginia Tech. In my 3rd year, I was swept up in this idea I was going to go study graphic design at the School of Visual Arts. My dad said this thing, and he said he'd do anything to make that happen. And I don't know if he remembers this or not, but he asked me a simple question. He said, can you do it on your own here? And it's because of that Playlab could be born, and that's it. Thank you. Thank you all. I'm here all day, so if you have questions or anything, come get me. Is Mishmish gone? Oh, sorry, guys. Mishmish was an iconic art store that Jeff worked at, actually. Jeff, my parents and I were just having breakfast, and we were joking about my credit card that they afforded me the opportunity to have. And my dad's joke is always Burger King, because Burger King, right, was next to Kogo. I don't know if it still is. And I get these, I was super overweight at the time. I get these breakfast sandwiches every day with Jeff. So I spent a lot of money at Burger King. And Mishmish, moleskins, expensive, refillable pencils, Stedler products, vellum, you name it. These things that were new to me at the time, definitely new to them. And it was, we spent a lot of money. And that's why I was very privileged, because they didn't really question it. I mean, they definitely questioned it, but they didn't stop it. And I'm glad they did it, because probably for a few grand, it enabled Jeff and I to start Playlab. So, Mishmish, which actually used to be next to Bulls prior to when it was on Main Street. Jay made us do a project where we had to redesign a city block, including Mishmish. That's what I got. Thank you.